All right, this is going to be a short one. I'm telling you it's going to be a short one. I hope I can keep it to be a short one. What am I talking about? Well, body cams. And specifically, what I'm actually going to talk about is the Ryan Whitaker incident in Phoenix. We had heard about this incident. We didn't know what happened. And now the bad body cam has come out, and it really puts into context the report. Because the report is technically accurate, but the body cam shows the actual context. And this was not a justified killing. It was not, as police say, it's not as a legal term, it would be not a justifiable homicide. It was a screw-up, period. If you haven't seen the video, I recommend you do, unless, you know, you're squeamish to the stuff, at which point I'm just going to kind of explain what happens. Body cam footage, there's actually two different sets of footage. There's one from the lead officer, and then there's one from the partner, who's the guy who actually did the shooting. They're showing up to basically one of those like outdoorish kind of apartment complexes. It almost kind of looks like one of those like places you'd see in like college, where it's like concrete and like the front doors just kind of all go to the same kind of porch area, or it kind of looks like a motel, but it's not. All these apartments lined up. They're responding to basically a call from a neighbor who the neighbor is being super vague as to what they're pissed off about. And it's basically a glorified noise complaint. Cops are annoyed. They're basically not being told 100% what the address is. They don't know where they are. Whatever. It's just normal stuff. And they're talking to the dispatch, and the dispatch is basically saying like, oh, this is what the call's saying. Not very helpful, right? So they don't really know what they're going into. They knock on the door. The cops get in a position where you stand off center to the left and to the right, so that, you know, basically the guy can't just, you know, lean out the door and shoot you in the face, because that does happen. You know, officers are killed like that. You know, they're just knocking on the door being normal, and somebody who's got a warrant, and the officer doesn't even know they have a warrant, and the guy who has a warrant just assumes the cops are there for them, and he decides just to shoot the cop in the face. So, you know, you stand at the door and you spread out, because you don't know what you're going up against. Reasonable. Pounds on the door. Goes, Phoenix police. Cool. No expectation that this guy's going to actually hear that, because it's also like middle of the night, and also, you know, apparently they're playing like PlayStation. Like if somebody just whacked on your door randomly and yelled something, would you know what that is? No. So, I mean, yeah, they did technically announce themselves, but there wasn't really a, you know, reasonable expectation that this guy knew that they were police, especially because, you know, like, if you show up with the red and blues on to a house, like, if I were to see, like, flashing lights out in front of my house, and then I were to hear a knock on my door, my first thought would be, like, okay, this is probably cops. And if they said, hey, you know, well, whatever PD, I would be, you know, I mean, I'd be suspicious a little bit, but it would be like, okay, I understand what's going on here. These guys, they didn't have any such approach. There wasn't any fanfare. They just were walking around. I don't know if they had their lights on when they first showed up. That's not really the body cam footage is. But in an apartment complex, you can't necessarily see out the window, essentially, to know, okay, now the guy knocking on your door is probably a cop. Doesn't know this. So, of course, Mr. Whitaker answers the door. He's in his boxers. And in his right hand, kind of tucked behind his back as he's leaning out, he's got a handgun. Perfectly reasonable. Somebody's pounding on your door in the middle of the night, and you don't know who it is. And they've apparently had some incidents before. Like he did. He dealt with this, what the girlfriend said, and I believe it. Where someone pounds on the door in the middle of the night, and what do? How do you respond? So, he had a gun on him. So, he leans out the door. And he begins to step out of the door. The officers shine a big old flashlight in his face. Basically, it's to disorientate somebody. It's to make sure, basically, they can't just raise and pull on you and shoot immediately. Okay. Fine. But now you have to understand, this guy can't see that you're police immediately. He realizes they're police when they basically say, gun. He's got a gun. And the dude, you know, like shudders for a second, and they pull. I mean, this is all an instant, and they pull their handguns out and they're pointing at them. And I'm gonna say the lead officer is got a pretty good view of them. And the first thing Mr. Whitaker does is he drops to his knees and he's trying to place his gun on the ground. I'll get into kind of, I don't want to say it's not that he made a mistake, but in terms of like something to keep in mind moving forward that might actually prevent this, even though this is the cop's fault in this case. So he drops to his knees immediately. Second he realizes they're cops. Whoa! Drops to his knees. He's putting his gun on the ground. He's kind of leaning over to the right because he's trying to put the gun on the ground, and also like he just dropped to his knees. You know, he's in his boxers. He doesn't have shoes on. And while that's happening, and this is all within like 2 seconds, officer whose body cam footage you can see, the officer who shot is the one standing behind him. From the officer's perspective, he loses sight of the guy's right arm, right hand, and the weapon because it's trying to be, you know, he can't see all of that at once, and he shoots him in the back multiple times. Main officer doesn't fire a shot; he just points it at him. Second officer, he shoots him. He thought he was a threat somehow. That's the gist of the in terms of the action of the video. There's some interactions with the girlfriend afterwards who it's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, and also hearing the lead cop try to like justify it, be like, oh well, you know, he stepped out towards us with a gun, and then like the girlfriend says, yeah, because you know there's somebody knocking on the door in the middle of the night. We don't know. Yeah, I don't think the cop was trying to be insensitive. I think he just was in a little bit of shock, and he was probably just in his head racing, trying to justify what just occurred. And you do say, well, I'm not the one who... He does... It's funny, he tries to justify... It's funny in a dark way. He tries to justify it, but then he says... But then when pushed, he says, well, I'm not the one who shot him. My partner shot him. Bro. Time for some compassion. You done effed up. They're yelling at her, step away from the gun. They're saying, I'm not going to shoot you. A lot of confidence she has in that, considering you just shot this guy for no reason. So, problem. There's a couple things I'm going to talk about real quick that we can, I think, learn from this. One, body cams are great, and they should be standard. Period. Because these kind of events actually don't happen that often. But when they do happen, it's really good that basically the state can't hide. This was a screw up. Whether this was homicide and this or a let's just say whether this was murder or it was negligent homicide, I'm not sure. It could very well be these officers were trained improperly, and that guy acted exactly how he was trained to act. And if that's the case, well, guess what? The officer's not the one necessarily who needs to do jail time, but the system itself needs to essentially, they need to compensate. They're going to need to compensate anyway because they killed this guy for no reason. Private citizen at his home in the middle of the night, and you cannot expect them to not answer the door armed. They have the right to do that. Period. You don't get to shoot somebody because of that. Period. Any more than if you were just a private citizen knocking on the door, and then the guy shows up with a gun, and you say, "Oh, I fear for my life because he was armed." Well, guess what? He had a more reasonable expectation to fear for his life from you because you're pounding on his door in the middle of the night, you know. And also, you know, they blind the guy with the flashlight. Like, he can't see. Like, there was no reasonable expectation for them to think that he was going to be able to comply as quick as they demanded. He also never pointed the weapon. It's open and shut. That basically the state is in the wrong here. At the very least, at the very, very, very least, these cops need to go. They need to go through complete retraining. Whoever taught them also needs to be complete retraining. Basically, there needs to be accountability for this occurring, because this should never occur. Then again, maybe they're not trained like that. Maybe this other officer is just a complete screw up. At which point, you know, it's tragic, and he shouldn't have a job anymore. Is it homicide? I don't. Or should say, is it murder? That's a lot tougher to prove, because he might just be bad at his job. You know, it's not good. It's not a good thing. So, one, body cam's a good idea. Two, things that could second thing that could have prevented this. Ring, video doorbells, that kind of stuff. That kind of crap. Not only because it records things so you get to see your perspective, but you get a much better look at what's going on outside ahead of time, and that can save your life. Like in this guy's case, if he had looked out and he saw that these were 2 police officers and he had no reason to expect otherwise, and he had just been able to check on his phone or look at the little device when they were at the door with the camera, that he wouldn't have essentially walked out the door armed, because he would have would have been more cautious. I mean, maybe he would have cracked the door first and talked to them, but he wouldn't have been armed, and that would have saved his life. Not his responsibility. I'm not saying that like he's at fault because he didn't have a way of seeing it, but it is true that had he known ahead of time, that probably could have saved his life. And again, this isn't clearing the officers at all, but this is a basically, suppose nothing changes, nothing ever changes. This is a way you can protect yourself. Third thing, I guess. Ryan, he didn't do anything wrong, period. And I understand exactly what he did. And when he went on his knees, he basically dropped to his knees and tried to put the gun down at the same time, and he was kind of doing a leaning thing. And he did something that was a mistake, but it wasn't. It's not a reason to shoot the guy, but it is something that perhaps people don't think about. If you have a weapon for self-defense, particularly something like a handgun, you have to be prepared to drop it from whatever height, from whatever you're doing, in place. You don't place it on the ground. If a cop is there and you are ordered to drop it, you have to just let go of it. You let it go. You don't place it on the ground. You don't slowly lower it. You don't freeze. You let go with your hands. And he tried to I think a lot of it was he was trying to keep his balance because of the way he was kneeling, but that then gave the officer pretext to say, oh well, I shot him he really didn't have the gun in his hand when he was shot, but oh, he went down and he was told, drop that thing, drop it, be ready to. Don't worry about the finish. Your gun, your self-defense gun should not be ornate. Drop it. Oh, you got an optic on it? Well, you better be willing to drop that optic on the ground, because it's not worth it. It's not worth babying it, sitting it down. You don't do that. Don't carry something that you plan to use for self-defense that you're not willing to have basically confiscated by investigators. Because if you're involved in a self-defense shooting, they might just take, they might take that from you. You can't complain. You can't say, oh, I paid $1,000 for this and I inscripted it. Don't do that. First of all, prosecution, if you're being prosecuted, they're going to use that against you. And second of all, you're not going to be able to keep it. You're not going to be able to keep it clean. You're not going to be able to keep it unscratched. Drop it on the ground. Drop it. And don't get a gun that's not drop safe, obviously. If he had, funny enough, if he had fumbled and lost control of it and it just tumbled out forward, he might actually be alive, because then the other officer would have been able to, he would have basically heard the gun hit the ground, he would have seen the gun hit the ground, and then it wouldn't have been like, maybe he wouldn't have panicked. I'm not saying that would have saved his life, because I think this officer just, she made so many mistakes, but that is something you got to consider if you're answering your door, if you're concealed carrying. You got to be willing. You got to you just got to drop it. You just have whatever. Oh no, it's gonna fall down in the gutter. It's gonna hit the concrete hard. Too bad. Let it go. It is not worth not getting a scratch on your gun. It is not worth getting shot, because somebody is either incompetent or or there's confusion. It's not worth it. You drop that thing. That's a procedural thing. Now, would those things have saved Ryan's life? There's a good chance they would. The last thing, I'm not so sure, because I think that the shooting officer made enough mistakes where that might have actually not made a difference. He might have been basically already down the path of, I'm going to pull the trigger on this guy ahead of time without it may have essentially been, he may have already started the thought process that was going to lead him to the decision to shoot, and that train may have actually left the station before Ryan even had time to react. Which, again, it's a protocol problem. It might be a problem specifically with that officer. Whatever it is, I'm not saying he could have done something to prevent his, to stop from dying. Maybe not. I don't know, and this is not saying like, oh, it's his fault because he didn't do these things, didn't know these things, or he didn't have a ring. No, 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 no. It's not his. It's not his, responsibility, I should say, to have those things. It's the state. The state shouldn't be doing what they did anyway. But in the event the state is going to do what they're going to do, there are things we see that and we go, oh, geez, maybe I should invest in a Ring doorbell. Or maybe I shouldn't carry answer the door with my stainless steel 1911 Series 70. Like, yeah, I can shoot it really well and I really like it, but I'm gonna just be instantly hesitant to just drop it on the concrete because it's too nice. Get yourself a junker. Get something. But you're gonna sell something for self-defense. I recommend buy used gun. Buy something that's already got some beat up marks on it, and say, this is a beater, because when it comes time where you got to drop it, you drop it. And it just falls down. And oh no, it hit the concrete and it's got a thing on it now. Too bad. You got to be willing to do that, I love shiny guns and I love firearms. I love sometimes I think the ornate stuff's cool, and I love historical arms and that kind of stuff. That's not my home defense, and that's not what I have as concealed carry. Concealed carry, I pretty much exclusively carry Glocks, cheapo Glocks. Sometimes I guess the sights are enhanced, or I'll paint the magazine and the rail a little bit so that you can see the numbers, just because I think it looks cool. But in the event I need to drop that on the ground from any height anywhere, it's gone. I don't have an emotional attachment to the non-scratchness of, or the aesthetics of the gun. No, drop it. So I mean, if you see a guy who's concealed carrying, or he's got one on his hip and that thing is like beat to hell, that he might have actually, that guy's serious about defending himself, and he's really thought about it, and that's why he's carrying that thing that's beat up, because he knows that if he's going to be willing to pull, he has to be willing to drop it in the event that basically police are involved. And there's certain training courses where, like, the first thing they do, you show up for your concealed carry, and then, like, everybody's got their new shiny guns, and the first thing they tell you to do is say, okay, you're gonna obviously the guns are unloaded, you're gonna throw them on the ground in front of you, and then you're gonna step on it, you're gonna kick it. And people, I just bought this gun. Doesn't matter. You're throwing it on the ground and you're gonna kick it. And that's how we're gonna start the course. Is basically making sure that you understand that thing. It's a tool, and if it's going to cost you your life if you're not willing to drop it on a moment's notice. So that's I should say that is a side note. This is not something that I don't think Ryan was given a chance even to do this, because I think it looked like he kind of lost his balance. So the first thing he did was drop to his knees. They said, "See your hands, drop to your knees." Like they said that at the same time, and that's what he did. And he was trying to put the gun down. He didn't have enough time to really think about this. He's not at fault. But the rest of us can learn that, hey, maybe that could have made a difference. That's something we can do. We can't control terrible police officers, and we can't control the bureaucracy and bad training and just misunderstandings. We can't control that. We can't control if somebody's going to SWAT us. We don't have control of that. So what are the things we can control? And one of those things is essentially, getting eyes on the situation with basically like Ring or something like that. That would be really good. And also just being like, oh my God, it's a cop, drop it, and just let it fall. Those are the kind of things we can control that might save our lives in that situation. Also, the cards might be up at that, because, like, again, I think this officer was pretty incompetent to do what he did. There's no way that it was, body cam footage is horrific. There's no way it was justified. Last thing I'm going to say is that obviously there needs to be a change in police protocol, because that's an unacceptable way to treat a citizen. Period. That shooting should have never occurred. Ryan did nothing wrong. The man's innocent. I don't care that he took a step. You were blinding him with a flashlight, and you're at his house in the middle of the night, or I should say, really at his apartment. He can't see. He doesn't know who you are. Yeah, you said it once, but that's not an expectation that he's going to have, you know, clairvoyance. And he was on his knees when you shot him in the back. That's not, you know, he's not, I should say, if he was on his knees and he was aiming his gun and he got shot in the back, well, that sucks. You know, sucks for him. But it's justified. But in this case, he wasn't aiming, he wasn't doing anything. He was fully complying as fast as he possibly could. So, Phoenix PD, you got to do something about this. You got to make sure this never happens again, or you have a protocol. One of the things I've kind of thought about is I don't like the idea of saddling cops with like crap tons of equipment or like another thing to drag around. But maybe in an event like this, like I'm trying to think, like, what was something that the cops could have done differently other than just not being fucking stupid that would have saved his life? Well, procedurally, right? Because basically there was no protection, and this other cop felt justified in shooting him because he thought that he was still had a gun in his hand and he was a threat to, not him actually, but the officer, his partner. I mean, that's who he shot on behalf of. He didn't shoot because he thought that his life was in immediate danger. He thought that the other officer's life was in immediate danger. He was completely wrong, and that was a very, very, very poor judgment call. But that's what he was thinking. So I kind of thought, what's a kind of a solution to this protocol? And I thought, you know what? What if you had full-sized ballistic-rated shields, clear, that stand up like a little stand. So when they knock on the door and you stand back and you're behind the shield that's like a big plexiglass, maybe it says police across the front. Maybe it's got lights on it. Who knows? Easily identifiable. That way, if somebody comes out and they're armed, good or bad, your life isn't in danger immediately. Because if the guy's going to try to flank to get on the other side of the shield, he's not moving as a threat and now you're going to shoot him. But in a case like this, where the dude just steps out and he doesn't even point his gun, as long as the guy as long as a ballistic shield essentially is in between you and the suspect, or basically the person who's armed, you don't have to shoot, because if that guy shoots, you're protected. So you know you don't have to worry about basically shooting first to stop the guy from hurting you. If you can't see that whether he's pointing the gun at the other officer or not, you then don't have to assume that if he is pointing it and I don't shoot, I'm going to cost this other cop his life. But if he isn't, then all of a sudden now you've just, what just happened here, where he wasn't doing anything threatening and he got shot in the back, and the officer who took the shot couldn't actually see what was going on. If they had ballistic shields in front of them, like, tall things they could just stand behind, that officer, it probably never would have even crossed his mind to shoot him, because he dropped to his knees, and even if he was aiming at the other officer, the shield was there. So you would just, it would de-escalate things significantly. Now, I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know if that's if there's a better solution. But in terms of like what would improve that interaction, so basically somebody doesn't have to die, and that also takes into account that basically police officers are killed basically when someone answers the door and just shoots them immediately. That does happen. It happens more often than the cops shoot the guy at the door. That's for sure. But we got to think about solutions for this, because this can't be how citizens and the police interact. Period. That's, if that continues and it's a procedural thing, and this keeps happening over and over again, well, then it's homicide, because then it's basically, or I should say it's murder, because then basically whoever's training these cops is just has no regard for the well-being of the citizen, period. And as a 2A person who's got to answer my door in the middle of the night, I don't want to get shot by the police because they blinded me with a flashlight and some asshole, or they got the wrong house or something, right? I don't want to get shot. So, we can fix this, I think. Oof. But, yeah, and good luck hearing BLM talk about this poor guy getting shot. They don't care, The only thing they'll say is that, it's an example that, like, the police need to be disbanded or something. They don't want to actually talk about procedure, Whatever. Okay, video's too long, but there it is.